This all comes from Biden and the White House, by the way. And they have their top people here. Because when he can't put two sentences together, he's the worst president in the history of our country. Can't speak, can't walk off a helicopter, can't walk off a plane, can't walk off a stage. And the only way they think they can win is if they can do something with Trump. Because we have an incompetent, the worst president in the history of the United States of America.
And there's former President Trump slamming President Biden while at the courthouse in New York City yesterday, saying that the so-called hush money trial is an attempt to keep him off of the campaign trail 6 months before an election. Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall was in the courtroom supporting Trump yesterday. Here's his takeaway from the trial.
30 years I have been a prosecutor and cared desperately about what goes on in our criminal justice system, and I have never seen in my career a greater perversion of the criminal justice system than I witnessed this morning.
Joining me now is the man himself, Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall. AG, thanks very much for being here this morning. Tell us what you saw yesterday and what was so outrageous to you.
Yeah, yesterday was political theater. It wasn't the prosecution of a crime. We sat and listened to hours of Michael Cohen talk about how he feels about former President Trump, about the affirmation that he needed in the work that he did for him. But what I didn't hear is a connection to Donald Trump to falsifying business records with the fraudulent intent to conceal another crime. And that's what he's charged with. And yesterday, the prosecution didn't make their case.
But, I mean, these people are not stupid, AG, right? I mean, Alvin Bragg has been doing what he's doing for years. How does he get away with having this whole charade, bringing in Stormy Daniels, bringing in Michael Cohen, you know, taxpayer money spent on this Donald Trump in a courtroom all day, if actually he has yet to identify what the crime is?
Yeah, he's not stupid, but his intention is not to convict Donald Trump. His intention is to damage the president in a way that Joe Biden becomes our next president. That is the design of this case. It is the work that we see the Department of Justice doing around the country, and it's why Republican AGs not only have engaged very specifically with the Supreme Court in Jack Smith's case against the president, it's why me and my colleague were here yesterday being able to support the president in what is clearly a politically motivated prosecution.
How much of this do you think is impacting the Supreme Court as it mulls its decision on whether or not President Trump has some kind of immunity from all of this? I mean, when you think about the totalitarianism of this, like on the one hand, you've got the Alvin Bragg case, everything you just said. You've got Jack Smith admitting that they tampered with evidence. Okay, those classified documents, pictures were all set up. You've got Fani Willis and her affair with, you know, her #1 prosecutor. You got, you know, Tish James and these fantastical numbers that she came up with that Trump has to pay up. I mean, do you think any of this and the public's reaction that Trump is continuing to win in the polls, that people just do not believe any of this, do you think that is weighing on the Supreme Court, that they're saying, look, obviously, everybody thinks this is political. We can't have this kind of a charade happen over and over again to a president. He's got to have immunity. What do you think the impact will be?
I think this validates the arguments that President Trump's counsel made in front of the Supreme Court, that you don't need a president looking over their shoulder or the decisions they make, understanding that when there is a transition of power, that the opposing power is going to come after them criminally. This validates exactly what they've argued to the Supreme Court, what we asserted in the brief that we filed with them as well. And it's why when the court renders its decision in that case, I think that we'll see that they'll embrace the idea that a president does have criminal immunity, and they'll define the boundaries of what that looks like. And
we'll probably get that decision, what, you think June?
Yeah, I think we're going to see it a little bit later into the session, but definitely we'll see it sometime in June.
All right, back to the Manhattan DA. Michael Cohen's going to be back on the stand today, potentially facing cross-examination from Trump's legal team. Yesterday, Cohen claimed that former Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg facilitated his reimbursement plan after he used his own money to pay off Stormy Daniels. He also said that Trump knew the details. Here's Eric Trump's, the president's son, response last night on Fox. Watch.
First of all, it's not true. My father was campaigning for 2 years at that point, and at the point that the payment was actually made, he was sitting in Washington D.C. This guy's a convicted felon. He lost his law license. He went down the tubes because he was defrauding apparently financial institutions based on taxi cab medallions in his own personal life.
AG, your thoughts?
Yeah, they have to be able to rely upon the word of a identified, a judicially found perjurer in court. You know, not only do we know that prior to walking in the courtroom that he has been convicted of lying, that the IRS has seen that he's lied, he talked about lying yesterday on 4 different occasions. We were counting him up where he acknowledged lying in the work that he did. And then he also acknowledged, maybe for the first time, that he scammed money from a third party as part of these payments. I don't think the jury is going to believe him. And I think cross-examination today is going to highlight all of the fallacies of the testimony that we heard yesterday.
So what are you expecting? We're in day 17. When does this end? When does this charade come to a close?
Yeah, I think it comes to a close soon. And how it ought to come to a close is this judge directing an acquittal of Donald Trump at the close of the state's case.
Yeah, but you really think that's going to happen? Isn't this a donor to the Democrats? Isn't this the father of the daughter who gave money? I mean, there's all these conflicts that we talk about all day long. It's amazing to me that the judge is still standing in this trial.
No, absolutely. He should have never been involved. When a judge's standard is the appearance of impropriety, his daughter's direct connection to fundraising off of this case means he should be nowhere around it. But the true result ought to be this case ought to be over long before it gets to the jury.
Wow. AG, thanks very much for your insights. We'll continue to follow this. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Steve Marshall this morning in New York.